It's a play filled with questions and no answers. None. Better than food, man. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. Get that coffee. Hope you're doing well wherever you are. Man, that's good. Delicious. All right. This is a long time coming. Today is William Shakespeare's tragic and longest play, Hamlet, written between 1599 and 1601, somewhere around there. Severely overdue. My first time reading it, ever. This is one from Penguin. There's not going to be near enough time in this review to go into everything that I'm interested in, so for patrons on Patreon, I'm going to be reviewing Hamlet, Poem Unlimited by Harold Bloom. And this will dive deeper into everything, so. Bloom was a huge fan of Hamlet. You can check that out by signing up on Patreon using the link below. Thanks a bunch. A lot is known and simultaneously unknown about the English playwright William Shakespeare, a man who truly needs no introduction as he's the most famous playwright in history. I haven't read a lot of him, actually. Just this and Romeo and Juliet and A Midsummer Night's Dream. But yeah, there are loads of legal documents, and of course we have his art, his plays and sonnets, which tells us so much about his insights and knowledge of human nature. So you have these two very interesting, very important pieces to kind of form a picture of the man. But as far as like actual private writings, there's like nothing. We know nothing about him. And yet some say, such as Emerson, that we know him better than any other figure in history. There will be a few spoilers in here, probably, but I'm not going to ruin the story. So a little bit about Hamlet. It's very interesting. According to Wikipedia, Shakespeare actually adapted it from this legend called Amleth, which was preserved by a 13th century chronicler and Danish historian named Saxo Grammaticus, and then was retold in the 16th century by a fellow, a Renaissance author named Francois Belforest, or Belforet, I believe is the correct pronunciation of his name, but I could be wrong. Hamlet is a tragedy, the story of the revenge taken by a young Danish prince whose father was murdered by his uncle, who then, less than 2 months after his father's murder, marries his mother to become king of Denmark. And it all begins as a ghost story. Suddenly, one night at the castle Elsinore in Denmark, Hamlet's friend Horatio and another fellow named Marcellus are visited by an apparition that strongly resembles the dead king of Denmark. They don't know he's been murdered yet. I know, spoiler. They bring Hamlet, who is mourning and is disgusted with his mother for having married his uncle so quickly, to see it. And this apparition, this ghost, tells his son the story of what has occurred. The characters of importance in the story are, of course, Hamlet, his mother Gertrude, the new King Claudius, Hamlet's uncle, who has married Hamlet's mother, Polonius, who is the advisor and chief counselor to Claudius, Polonius' son Laertes, and his daughter Ophelia, who is in love with Hamlet. And finally, Horatio, Hamlet's good friend. I think I've got them all the major ones. It's a play with many, many moving parts. And of course, there's also Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who are friends of Hamlet, who are sort of commissioned by his mother and uncle/king as spies to spy on Hamlet and see what he's up to. This is a story in part about sons and fathers. 3 sons, Hamlet, Fortinbras, and Laertes, avenging 3 fathers in different ways. 3 different sons avenging 3 different fathers. Yeah, the father-son theme is very strong in this one. And it's interesting because, you know, Shakespeare had a young son named Hamlet who died tragically. And in 1601, Shakespeare's father died. So these relationships are definitely on Shakespeare's mind when he's writing this, it seems. And the whole idea of mortality. The whole idea of mortality and vengeance and life and death and what it all means. Yeah, anyways, moving on. So after the ghost reveals himself to Hamlet and tells him what happened, he sets out to take revenge for his murdered father, first intending to discover if King Claudius is actually guilty. He doesn't actually believe the apparition at first. He has to test Claudius to see if he's actually guilty in a very interesting way that involves a play within the play. It gets very interesting. And every step of the way, he's battling with himself. This is not Hamlet is not a figure who is confident. He's not the traditional hero at all. He's kind of a villain. He's sort of an anti-hero and completely insecure. Very, very relatable in his inability to decide, in his confusion at having to weigh all the different sides of what's coming at him, in his self-pity, in his self-deprecation, as Orson Welles actually pointed out. He's a very complex character, as human beings are very complex. That's the brilliance of this book. That's the brilliance of the story, It's very, very deep, for lack of a better word, and timeless for this reason. It seems like a simple narrative on the surface. It's not at all. There's so much going on here. I really can't wait to read what Bloom has said on it. Anyways, every step of the way he's battling with himself, it seems. Weighing the decisions, his thoughts, his own desires. He is not at all secure, but he is driven by something. He begins to seem crazy to the others. They think he's actually gone mad, to seem legitimately insane. And not only that, he actually drives others insane through his actions. Hamlet is not what you'd think of as a hero at all. He's not at all what people would call a good person. Not at all. He's a force of nature. Incredible. Like Harold Bloom has said, totally inward, yet theatrical. Quite literally, as there's like I said, there's a play within the play that's staged with the intent of producing an effect in the king's response that will reveal his murderous guilt. And that's what Hamlet's going on. If the new king reacts a certain way, he did in fact murder Hamlet's father. Therefore, Hamlet shall move forward and take his revenge. And in the middle of all this revenge seeking, in this catastrophic maelstrom of so many exhausting things and endeavors, it's a meditation on mortality, on death. It's a play filled with questions and no answers. None. At one point, Hamlet wonders whether it would just be better to commit suicide, end it all. And that's to part with one of the most famous soliloquies in history. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. The famous soliloquy on death and suicide. To be or not to be. That is the question. Wondering if it's better to sleep no more, but realizing we're all stopped from finding out because of our minds. Aye, there's the rub. Wondering what misfortune awaits on the other side in the undiscovered country from which no traveler returns, right? I'm quoting from the play now. And finally realizing that consciousness doth make cowards of us all, resigning ourselves to the devil we know, until our time is up. I've watched several performances of this soliloquy. My favorite, and the one that I think really gets the exhaustion in the whole thing, was a fellow named Adrian Lester. And I've linked to it below, you can check it out. Yeah, he really gets the whole tone of sheer exhaustion in there. He really gets that. Andrew Scott's was great too. He gets the anxiety and insecurity right, but it's different. Yeah, they're all different. That's what I love about watching all of them. Shout out to Harry Kirkham for the Andrew Scott one. Thank you for the link, man. So the unknown country indeed, death's domain. But you know, on the flip side, you know, the ghost, Hamlet's father, is in fact, you know, an apparition from the other side. He has returned, though forced to fast in fires during the day, right? And wander at night. But is he his father? Is he real? Or is Hamlet just insane? He acts insane. It's a play filled with questions and no answers, just like life. At one point, Hamlet is kind of banished, sent away to England, and something happens and he returns to continue his revenge. And when he returns, he's hanging out with Horatio, and they come across the castle's gravedigger. And that's the famous scene with the skull, when Hamlet's asking him about bodies rotting in the ground, you know, because this gravedigger is literally standing in the grave, you know, doing his work, and they just start bantering and shooting the shit, basically. And, you know, they're talking about bodies and how long they lie there and take to rot, and so on and so forth. And the gravedigger picks the skull out of the earth. And he says, you know, basically, oh, guess who this was? And Hamlet's like, I have no idea. And he says, oh, this was Yorick. It was somebody Hamlet knew. Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him well, Horatio, a fellow of infinite jest and most excellent fancy. He hath bore me on his back 1,000 times. And now, how abhorred in my imagination it is. My gorge rises at it. Here hung those lips that I have kissed I know not how oft. Where be your jibes now? Your gambols, your songs, your flashes of merriment that were wont to set the table in a roar. Not one now to mock your own grinning, quite chop-fallen. Now get you to my lady's table, and tell her, let her paint an inch thick. To this favor she must come. Make her laugh at that. Prithee, Horatio, tell me one thing.
What's that, my lord?
Dost thou think Alexander looked over this fashion in the earth?
Even so.
And smelt so. Pah! To what base uses we may return, Horatio. Yorick. When Shakespeare wrote Hamlet, his young son tragically had died. His son's name was Hamnet. Shakespeare's father also died the year Hamlet was finished, in 1601. I believe that's when it was finished. Apparently Hamlet was actually performed on a ship named the Red Dragon, commanded by the sea captain William Keeling off the coast of the Sierra Leone. This was revealed in Keeling's diary. That was the very first recorded performance of Hamlet. I just thought that was such a striking visual image, you know? This ship off the coast of Africa. It's just kind of cool. So yeah, the legend Hamlet has loads of plot similarities to Hamlet. Shakespeare didn't write a great deal of the actual plot, it seems. Or at least the basic structure of the story wasn't his original creation. It's a very old story. But he did, I believe, change the ending into a tragedy, and of course made it the work of absolute genius that it is. I discovered all of this from this fascinating lecture on the history of Hamlet by this fellow on YouTube, and I've linked to it below. The guy's name is Eric Luttrell. It's very cool. It's fascinating. It's a tragic story of revenge. It really is, and maybe the most famous tragic story of revenge in history, save for Homer's The Iliad, and for good reason. It's astounding. It's a story, as the introduction in this edition says, involving violent actions, misdirected, unknowingly self-directed, and the labyrinthine ironies of human purpose and human error, which is very true. Mistakes abound. You know, in revenge plots, everything just goes wrong. Few stories quite go as wrong as Hamlet goes wrong. By the end, it is quite the thing to behold. It's a tragedy. Complex, intricate, nuanced, maybe unfathomable in its entirety in a single lifetime. Shakespeare wrote it when he was 36 or 37. It's astounding. More than remarkable. More than impressive. And yeah, this was the first time I read it, at the tail end of 32. It's actually kind of amazing I got this far in life without having the narrative spoiled for me. It's incredible. That's actually pretty impressive, I feel, given the fame and notoriety. It's probably just like in the water, you know? Some things I knew, some things I didn't. If you're lucky enough to have not read it and would like to save all the surprises, of which there are plenty for the first viewing, to keep them fresh, just please buy the book. Don't read the introduction because they'll spoil it probably. I think they did one or two for me when I read it, and I was just like, nope, skipping that. I guess they're just assuming that everybody and their mother has read the book or knows the story. But yeah, my suggestion would be to just pause this review, get the book, and click on the link below to the performance of Richard Burton as Hamlet in 1964. And just start at the beginning of the play and read along with the video. Stop when you don't understand something, go back, figure out what it means, and keep going. And soak it all up like a sponge. That's what I did, at least. It's fun to read Shakespeare. It's like you're reading a foreign language, but you immediately comprehend most of it. It's very strange. Richard Burton gives a humorous performance too, filled with sort of fourth wall breaking stuff, you know, awkward pauses and mocking laughter, very enjoyable. It's good stuff. And I'll say, the line at the end where Horatio said, "There's still some liquor left," made me cry. That got me, just because of his devotion to Hamlet as a friend. And I've also linked to this amazing talk, this table discussion with Orson Welles and Peter O'Toole and another fellow, all discussing Hamlet. And there's just some great stuff in there. "I think Hamlet is the man to believe in the play of Hamlet," said Orson Welles. And I'm in absolute agreement right now. I've heard people in the past and recently watched a video with a person doing an analysis and complaining about Hamlet's whining, comparing Hamlet's soliloquies of melancholy to their common lives, as if they'd in any way dealt with anything in life on the level of Hamlet, which is absurd. I'd like to see what happens to one of those people complaining that he's whining, or that he's emo, or just depressed, or too mopey, or whatever. I'd like to see what would happen to one of these people if their uncle murdered their father, then fucked their mother and married her within 2 months of their father's death. Let's see what happens. Let's see how you feel. What's your reaction? Are you whining about it too much? Or you're acting crazy? Are you saying that somebody would not act crazy in that situation? You are. Yeah. Which is absurd. It's absurd. And it isn't that I can't understand where they're coming from in their criticisms. It's just that they completely reveal their youth, like immediately. Or worse if they're older, you know, which I'm sure plenty of people do. Because it reveals their all too still present immaturity and lack of wisdom. For Hamlet is nothing if not wise, even though he's supposed to be young, I think. Mad, sure, but no madder than any other, than you or I. Well, maybe. In fact, Hamlet is possibly one of the greatest depictions of the sharp-witted human psyche that is defiant and hell-bent on achieving what he desires, but questions himself the entire time. Hamlet's a fucking archetype. I mean, if there ever was one. And to top it all off, he does some evil shit as well. But on top of all of that, he's funny and he's kind of charming. Maybe that's one of the greatest things about it. It's incredible. He's much more of a cynic than a nihilist, and much more of a tragic hero than a moping crybaby. I mean, he's active. Hamlet is nothing if not active. He's quite active. There's nothing passive about Hamlet. Hamlet wants revenge, and he gets it, and he works for it really, really hard. It just annoys me because it's like people who would make fun of somebody like Trent Reznor for making sad, mopey music or something. It just says a lot about the person, And that person is me sometimes, I talk shit all the time. But fuck it, you get my drift. Not that I've criticized Reznor, not at all. I think he's a fucking god. It is true, though, that Hamlet would have loved 9 Inch Nails. Wow, that really works, doesn't it? Think about that, it would be cliche, but what have I become? Right? My sweetest friend, everyone I know goes away in the end. And you could have it all, bum bum. My empire of dirt, I will let you down. I will make you hurt. I fucking love that song. It's so good, right? And Hamlet does. He hurts every single person he comes into contact with. Everybody. Everybody. Not to spoil it, but he destroys all of his relationships. All of them. In various ways. Every last one. Horatio is debatable, but the relationship is technically destroyed by the end of it, isn't it? I think I'm just doing this because, the downward spiral has been my fucking soundtrack for the pandemic. And I gotta say, it's like that comment on Fantano's review that he did of the downward spiral a while back. This comment near the top that got thousands of thumbs up. That person nailed it. 9 Inch Nail. Get it. Anyways. In a way, that's kind of the thing with Hamlet, right? Maybe when you're young, you're powerfully impressed by him or irritated. Maybe as you grow older, you come to think that that was just your immaturity. And then you live a little longer and you get a bit older and you realize, no, in fact, he was exactly right. He was exactly right. This is why Bloom loves it, because Bloom knew tragedy. Bloom knew tragedy, without question. And I have a feeling that the play is more nuanced and more powerful than I could ever imagine. Hamlet is not lying, which is what most people do to protect their sanity, but he's crazy, right? Another brilliant part of Hamlet is that it, as you can see in this discussion with Orson Welles and Peter O'Toole, it presents a startlingly real picture of human behavior and leaves 1,000 mysteries which will be debated until the end of time. Who did Hamlet really think was behind the curtain in his mother's room? Why didn't he do it while the king was praying? What about the fate of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern? Out of character for Hamlet? Too far? Or totally in character? Is there a ghost? Is the ghost responsible for Hamlet's insanity? Is Hamlet possessed? Certainly plausible. Possessed by a thirst for vengeance? Or is it supernatural? Or perhaps most compellingly, what's the difference? If we don't know where these things arise from in general, which we don't, what's the difference? I take the opinion of Wells on this. I don't think Hamlet is at all crazy, but rather the only person who has actually decided to be sincere and reflect upon everybody's bullshit. Perhaps most of all his own. But that's why he seems crazy. Because he's no longer playing their game. Because it's garbage. And you can always spot that in a great story. The villain who is in fact the hero. Maybe that's the making of a true hero. And what I mean by that is the one who is not afraid to be considered, overwhelmingly sometimes, the villain. And did he love Ophelia? I haven't even gotten into that. After what he did to her. Did Hamlet love anybody? Can Hamlet love anyone? Bloom, I believe, would say no. But then, what else but love is driving his revenge? He loved his father, enough to do all of this, at least. If Hamlet loves anybody, it's not Ophelia in my opinion, but there's certainly that argument. But it's Horatio. Not in a romantic way, but in a brotherly way. Horatio, in my initial reading, just seemed like a dog who follows his master. But within that love, that devotion and sincerity as a friend, he really has the ability to break your heart. you've really got to watch the Wells and O'Toole chat, because it gets you up to speed immediately with the major questions that I feel everyone will love to discuss, and that will reveal so much more about the play and the reader. It's an incredible piece of work. A puzzle, a maze, an enigmatic existential tragedy, the same things that could be said about life and all our individual lives themselves. Hope that wasn't too pretentious, but if you haven't read this damn thing, please do so as soon as you can. And always remember what Peter O'Toole said. The terrifying thing is if you try and explain Hamlet. I'll leave you with that. Better than food. I mean, imagine if I said otherwise. I'd probably be shot on the spot. What little credit I have would swiftly be removed. And rightfully so, I should say. It's riveting. I mean, it's a intellectual gothic tale of revenge and an existential meditation on life, death, love, and madness, featuring a total anti-hero and one of the most complex representations of human ever produced in literature. I don't know what else I can say to sell it. So, if that didn't sell it, I give up. So what did I dislike about it? Nothing. Who should read it? Everybody. Now. Shut up. Fucking neighbors. Coffee time. And you all know how this works, so I'm just gonna skip the spiel. If you want to support the show, I sincerely appreciate it. Link is below. Thank you so much. Tulse. Tulse Pym. Thank you very much, Tulse. Hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. Really appreciate it. You're going to receive Hamlet by William Shakespeare, plus a bag of delicious coffee. And I hope you love both. Thank you so much. Well, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Please check out our bookstore on Instagram as well. We'd really appreciate it. We're selling out of stuff all the time, but there are still some things available on there, so please check it out. Please subscribe if you have not already, and hit the thumbs up if you enjoy this, and always remember, bring a book wherever you go. All right, take care of yourselves. Have a great night. Talk to you soon. Ciao.